In the recent couple of updates, the Poise team of Limbus company got a lot better, with two incredibly powerful identities from the Full Stop office joining the roster, and a new ego skill added with the LCB regular checkup event, changing things up for the foreseeable future. And with the rerun of the Yield My Flesh to Claim Their Bones event drawing near, what better time is there to revisit the topic of the state of Poise teams? Well, probably after the event starts, as we do not know whether the new Kurokuma IDs will have Poise in their kits, but if they do end up being Poise IDs, I'll just have to make another video. Anyways, today we will take a look at the best Poise team I can come up with, as well as all of its variations that can work well. We'll talk about the combat and support identities used for this team and what they bring to the table, as well as some notable ego skills that you should keep your eye on. And after that, we'll look at when the team can be used for maximum efficiency. But before we start, you know the drill. Most of the people who watch my videos are not subscribed, and if you find yourself coming back to my videos or end up enjoying this one, you should consider subscribing to never miss my new uploads. It takes just 1 second and helps me out a ton. Without further ado, let's get back to Poise. Starting off, here's the team. This variant of the team is one I consider to be the best for human encounters. However, in many specific scenarios, other variants can be better, so stick around until the variants section to see more. To be more specific, the combat lineup consists of the Blade Lineage core of Mersault, Yisang and Dawn, the Full Stop duo consisting of Heathcliff and Honglu, and rounding out the squad we have Butler Ryoshu. You might notice that some familiar faces are not present on the team. So let me help you understand why I made these picks by going over what each of these identities does for the team. We'll start with the most obvious choices, the Full Stop duo. I have a video on these two that you might want to check out, but I'll briefly go over them here. Full Stop office rep Honglu is an incredible identity, boasting high damage, great clash power, a pride skill 3 and defense, as well as multiple ways to make Heathcliff shoot more than he usually would. Honglu mainly wants to spend his ammo on his second and third skills if we're going by damage, but his first skill actually gives him a ton of poise, so don't be afraid to use it when cleaning up a wave, especially considering that Honglu gets a free reload anyways, which should allow him to have enough ammo even for very long encounters. Notably, this identity gets much weaker if Full Stop Heathcliff is not on the team, as a lot of Honglu's effective damage actually comes from allowing Heathcliff to use more skills, as well as the additional coins Honglu gets when Heath is on the bench. Is he weak enough to not be useful without Heathcliff? No, not at all, but it's still worth noting, so that you know that if you have Honglu, getting Heathcliff from support is your top priority. Speaking of Heathcliff, his Full Stop identity is even more impressive than Honglu's. Full Stop office fixer Heathcliff deals immense damage with his skills, and his low coin count allows him to maintain his poise stack very easily. Much like Honglu, Heathcliff wants to spend all of his ammo on his second and third skills. However, this time the first skill actually has no redeeming qualities. Luckily, Heathcliff's passive makes evading for a turn a worthwhile choice, as Heathcliff gets a lot stronger after not doing anything for a turn. Full Stop Heathcliff's value lies entirely in his damage output, as he's an absolute monster when it comes to dealing with enemies without pierce resistance. However, due to being an ammo identity, he is on a timer. When Heathcliff's ammo runs out, he too literally runs out of the encounter, leaving behind a slot that can be filled by a backup identity or given to the first identity deployed. But that's not the end of his value, as if Honglu is on the field, his second and third skills get an additional coin that functions just like Heathcliff's follow-up shot would. Meaning once again, you want the Full Stop duo together in your team. And while Heathcliff is a better standalone ID than Honglu, having both of them provides your team with a synergy that's greater than the sum of its parts. Next up we have another synergy. This time is the old and familiar Blade Lineage core of Mersault, Yisang and Dawn. This core can be modified, but we'll get to how later. Mentor Mersault is an identity that you all should be familiar with. He's known for clashing well, buffing allies, refusing to die and claiming people's bones. And even though Think Mersault is out and can work incredibly well in the damage department, I'm sticking with Mentor, who enables Yi-Sang oh so well, while also having access to one of the strongest skills on the Poise team in To Claim Their Bones. One of Mentor's strong suits is his Sin Affinity spread. With both his S1 and S2 being Pride, Mersault can easily anchor Pride resonance chains with incredible consistency, and activating Pride Res is one of the most important things in Poise. Additionally, Mersault works as an offensive support unit designed to help Blade Lineage Yi-Sang in this team. His passive allows Yi-Sang to gain more Poise, which helps him reach his passive's conditionals, while Mersault's skills 1 and 2 can also be lined up with those of Yi-Sang to buff his clash power and damage even further. On the topic of Yi-Sang, his Blade Lineage ID is still good. Even though he's older than the game itself, Blade Lineage Yi-Sang refuses to be a victim of power creep, and keeps clashing well and dealing damage. He's also one of the few identities on this team that absolutely never ever have to fear losing their Poise stack, as Yi-Sang is designed to stack great amounts of Poise count for his own passive. Outside of his offensive capabilities, Yi-Sang pretty much has nothing. He's an old ID, so his kit is a lot less convoluted than those of new IDs, but that doesn't mean he's weak. When paired up with Mersault, Yi-Sang gets his passive up real quick, and after stacking the swordplay of the Homeland buff on top of that, Yi-Sang's literal most common skill gets to outroll most skills in the game with a clash power of 19. If used in tandem with Mersault's skill 1, Striker's stance can actually reach even more power. And you can't forget that the skill has a +5 offense level modifier, so it's really difficult for Yi-Sang to lose a clash. Yi-Sang's damage also gets notably buffed when in a team with Mersault, making his reliance on his mentor similar to that of the full stop IDs, though this relationship is much more one-sided. Another identity that relies on mentor Mersault is Blade Lineage Don Quixote, who acts as a Poise support for this team. Her skill effects and passive ability all give out Poise to allies with smaller stacks, allowing those on the brink of losing it all to hold on a bit longer. Don's offensive stats aren't exactly fantastic, but with Mersault on the team, she becomes an identity that can hold her own against even the newest enemies. There's not much else to say about her really, as her value is pretty straightforward, and once you put her on your team, you will clearly see the difference that she makes. That being said, with the release of Torakalja Roshu, this identity can be rivaled in terms of Poise support, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Dawn get pushed out of her slot once more Poise IDs are released. And finally, we have Butler Roshu. This identity works really well at allowing Poise to clean up groups of enemies, as Roshu has access to a multi-target skill 2, a reusable skill 3, and a powerful AoE ego as well. Roshu's main gimmick is juggling Poise count, as her second skill consumes 6 whole stacks of it to gain attack weight. This is balanced out by her third skill, giving her an absurdly high amount of Poise count on use. Roshu's Poise potency generation can be a bit lackluster at times though, making her reach the Poise cap later than her allies. But still, with the help of Dawn and her ego, Roshu can pretty easily stay at a high amount of Poise, even though she's juggling her count. By now you should be able to tell that a lot of Roshu's value lies in Torakalja, so I won't waste any more time on her identity and will look at her ego a bit later. With that, we're done with the starting lineup, but before we move on to the supports and ego for the Poise team, let's take a look at other identity options that you can go for in certain scenarios. First off, we have Sync Association Sinclair. While Roshu is your go-to pick against humans, Sinclair shines in boss fights, with his kit being built around ramping up power when continuously clashing against one enemy. And that concludes the other IDs section. Yeah, I'm not even joking. You would expect the 6th slot for this team to have a lot of contenders, but in reality, Blade Lineage Faust simply isn't as good as Roshu against humans and is just worse than Sinclair in boss fights. And even if you took a hypothetical slash-weak boss as an example, Roshu still gets value from Torakalja, and it's not like her skills are bad against one target, they're just not fully realized. So even then, Faust is not your priority pick. Also, both of her SP recovering skills are tough to fuel on a Poise team, so you can't even use that as an argument for her. It's a shame, because I love how she looks. Picot Captain Ishmael is in the same boat, as she also loses to Roshu and Sinclair in their preferred environments in terms of damage, while also having an anti-synergy between her assist attack mechanic and the full stop crew. Additionally, Ishmael has a tough time keeping her SP full in human encounters when other IDs get kills, and with the dominance of the full stop duo and Butler Roshu, she's gonna lose a lot of SP. Outside of these two, there are some other Poise identities in the game, but I wouldn't recommend using them unless you lack some stronger options, in which case they can serve as decent stopgap solutions. Before we move on to when Poise should be used, we have to take a look at the support identities and ego present in this team. For the support lineup we have the following identities. Faust is on her Blade Lineage ID, which allows the first deployed ally to inflict defense level down on enemies when critting with a slash skill. Her other support passives either can't be used by this team, do nothing for it, or both, with the exception of maybe her base ID. Roshu stays on her Butler ID even when on the bench, as she can help one ally get more Poise count when winning clashes. Ishmael is running her Picot Captain identity, as it allows the ally with the highest SP to gain more Poise potency and count on kill. Rodion can either run her Kurokuma identity or her LCCB identity. Both of them increase the damage of one ally, and both of them have costs that can be difficult to attain. Kurokuma has a slightly more flexible effect, and LCCB has a slightly better cost, so the choice is yours. If Sinclair is not on the field, he has a couple of options for support identities. His Sync identity can help Heathcliff reach even greater speeds to deal more damage. His Blade Lineage ID gives the slowest ally 1 power, and his Los Moriakis ID can give an ally bonus damage against lower SP humans once you get 4 Gloom resources. For Otis, I recommend her Blade Lineage identity for that sweet damage boost, but her Magic Bullet ID can actually help Roshu Sorakalja secure early kills. And finally, Gregor can run his Twin Hook identity to help Heathcliff deal even more damage after every kill. As for the ego skills that are important to this team, Poise has a couple. Sorakalja Roshu is the ego I've mentioned the most in this video, so let's start with it. This ego skill does two things for the Poise team. First, it acts as a fairly powerful AoE slash damage dealing ego, with its power and damage being increased with Roshu's Poise stacks. It's also pretty easy to fuel. However, much more importantly, Sorakalja provides Roshu with one of the best effects in the game, Nebulizer Beta. And if you're familiar with the Mirror Dungeons, you should know the effect of the Nebulizer Ego gift present in that mode. And if you do, you know how strong it is. Nebulizer Beta is effectively just Nebulizer brought outside of Mirror Dungeons. But it's not quite as powerful as its gift counterpart. To understand why, let's look at Nebulizer Beta itself. Much like the gift, Nebulizer Beta gives allies Poise potency and count whenever a Pride Absolute Resonance is activated. However, unlike the gift, the amount of allies affected by this gain differs depending on Roshu's stacks of the effect. At one stack, Roshu will gain the effect for herself and also target one ally with the lowest Poise potency. With each stack, one more ally is affected by Nebulizer Beta. To gain more stacks of the effect, Roshu can use her ego, kill enemies with it, and also kill allies with its corrosion. With Nebulizer Beta at high stacks, you could even ditch Blade Lineage Dawn in favor of a better identity, as your team's Poise stacks will get insanely high as long as you can keep up Pride Absolute Resonance. All in all, this ego is really good, and also pretty easy to use. Another ego skill that can turn ally death into value is Fell Bullet Yisung. I have a video on this ego skill which you can check out if you want, but in short, this skill deals great damage to a lot of enemies if you can manage to take out an ally with the first coin. Now, sacrificing a normal team member for this is rarely a good idea, but if you deploy a sacrificial ID in your starting lineup, you can play around Fell Bullet to quickly get rid of a group of Pierce weak enemies. This skill is also pretty easy to fuel, and is something you should keep your eye on whenever you find yourself fighting enemies that have unbreakable coins, as that mechanic can often leave your allies staggered and near death, in which case you effectively get a fell bullet shot for free, resulting in a ton of damage. Just don't forget that Mersault can cheat death once per encounter when using this skill. And while these two skills are the main ones that make a difference, there are two more skills that can come in handy in a tough spot. Roshu's Blind Obsession can be used to fill a hole in a Pride Resonance and hit multiple enemies. It also has a decent passive that helps out Roshu's Poise stack. Its cost also differs from that of Soracalgia, so you can use both in tandem fairly easily. Heathcliff's Fell Bullet can also fill a hole in the Resonance chain, while providing Heathcliff with additional ammo on kill and dealing a fairly good amount of damage to one target. Once again, this Ego's passive also helps out with stacking Poise on Heathcliff, although he usually doesn't struggle with that. And now we're done with all the parts that make the Poise team. All that's left is to talk about when and how to use it. And the answers to both of those questions are pretty simple. Regardless of whether an encounter is a boss or a group of humans, as long as whatever you're fighting is weak to Pride, the Poise team will do great things in that encounter. And considering that most humans have normal resistances against all sin affinities, you want to look for enemies that are Slash or Pierce weak, as the only damage type this team notably lacks is Blunt. Because of the fact that Poise as an effect is a buff that your allies get, instead of a debuff that you inflict on enemies, the team can be easily played in all types of encounters while providing very similar results. This makes the team very easy to pick up and beat the game with for new players, as all you need to think about is managing Pride Resonance for maximum value on every turn. Though if you want to take the team a step further, you can incorporate sacrifices into your normal play, just like I mentioned when talking about Ego gifts. By putting a low-level identity that can help fuel Ego on your starting lineup, you give your Soracalgia and Fell Bullet sacrifice options that greatly increase the strengths of said Ego skills. Now, I don't recommend going for this every single time, as at times it can slow you down, but setting up a mean Soracalgia early can allow you to slot in better identities for very long encounters, while hitting a full power Fell Bullet at the start of a Refraction Railway segment can be highly destructive. But outside of these sacrifices, Poise doesn't really have any notable ways to overcomplicate the team for a bit more value. So instead, allow me to let you in on a little secret. In Mirror Dungeons, Poise can be incorporated into every team. Now, this should be common knowledge by now, but if you haven't heard of this, listen up. The Nebulizer Ego gift provides your whole team with a burst of Poise at the start of an encounter, and with the help of any kind of Pride Resonance, as well as some other Poise gifts like Ornamental Horseshoe, Four-Leaf Clover, Pendant of Nostalgia, Emerald Elytra and so on, you can keep the stacks of this effect going for a long time, effectively increasing your damage by 20% through critical strikes. But you don't do this just for the bonus damage, no. Instead, you want to get yourself a tier for a Poise gift, Clear Mirror Calm Water. This gift allows your identities to get a juicy 15 offense level up steroid when they crit, while also greatly increasing the value of critical hits by increasing their damage modifier. With this gift in hand and other Poise gifts supporting your stacks, you can effectively take the great power designed for the Poise team and transfer it over to any team in the game. This is an extremely powerful strat that makes any team much stronger, and when the Infinite Mirror Dungeon mode finally comes out, I am sure incorporating Poise into your gift selection will be the best way to overcome late floors. And with that, we have reached the end of my Poise team overview/guide. The team is pretty easy to build right now, and doesn't take much cognitive function to play. However, even though it may not run deep in its mechanics, the Poise team is still your trusted tool for exterminating any Pride weak pest, big and small alike. If you feel like I missed something or want to add your own tips and tricks, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments section below, and I'll make sure to read each one of your comments. If you enjoyed the video at any point, leave a like to let me know. And if you want to see more content like this, consider subscribing to not miss my new uploads. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Goodbye!